All right, so we're recording. My money went where? Yeah. Okay, let me go back and share week 5 screen. All right, so module 11, 12, and 13. It's hidden, but it will be available at the end of tonight, your comprehension test. That's why it looks like there's 2. It's because you're seeing the instructor's side. This is just a placeholder, and then you'll see the one that I'm proofreading through and will be available at the end of tonight for you guys to take. Do me a favor and take your time on that one. I also did it like I always do. I give you guys 2 tries, and then it takes the highest score. I also made an extended timer on this one because it's done like a weekly test, but it has more material than your average weekly test, so you have a much longer timer on it. So I tried to give you guys as much buffer as possible to make it easier for you guys, okay? So tonight we are doing module 12, evading IDS, firewalls, and honeypots. And if I remember correctly, this one's a little bit dense. So I just want to warn you. Steve, did you have a question? You know your mic's still live?
No, I just forgot to turn the mic off.
Okay, I just wanted to warn you. All right, so minimize that. We're going to do the IDS, IPS, firewall, and honeypot concepts. Then we will demonstrate some solutions, different techniques to bypass, and then tools for evasion, detection techniques, and then, of course, we'll round that out with countermeasures. And take a quick look and see how many slides we're looking at. Yeah, there's quite a few in this, so I may just be like, and this slide has this on it. So an IDS, which we've talked about before, intrusion detection system. So this one is a software system or hardware device that inspects inbound and outbound network traffic for suspicious patterns that may indicate network system or security, may indicate a network or system security breach. The IDS checks traffic for signatures that match known intrusion patterns and signals an alarm when it is found. Depending on the traffic to be monitored, the IDS is placed outside or inside the firewall to monitor suspicious traffic originating from outside and inside the network. And you can see a little graphic of how they position it there. Yeah, just a few slides. Okay, so how does it detect intrusion? Signature recognition, anomaly. I'm doing great. You tell I had to take muscle relaxers. Anomaly detection, and then protocol anomaly detection. So signature recognition, this is one of those ones that identifies events based on previous events that it has seen. Anomaly detection, this one detects intrusions based on what they usually have to do. Remember, I was talking about baselines. They set a baseline, and anything that comes off of that is considered anomalous, and then it sets a flag. Protocol anomaly detection. With this, models are built to explore the anomalies in a way that which the vendors deploy, like the TCP/IP specifications. With those models, again, you have to have kind of a baseline in order for it to know there's an anomaly. Indications of intrusions, file system intrusions, the presence of new or unfamiliar files or programs, changes in file permissions. That one right there is usually what I see is the file permissions. Unexplained changes in file size. Another one, rogue files on the systems that do not correspond to the master list of signed files or missing files. Network intrusion. Repeated probes of the available services on your machines, connections from unusual locations, repeated login attempts from remote hosts, a sudden influx of log data. System intrusions, short or incomplete logs, unusually slow system performance, missing logs or logs with incorrect permissions or ownership, modifications to system software and configuration files, unusual graphic displays or text messages, gaps in system accounting, system crashes or reboots, unfamiliar processes. Okay, there are a couple of different types of IDS systems. There's the NIDS, or network-based intrusion detection system. These consist of a black box that's placed on the network in promiscuous mode to listen for patterns indicative of an intrusion. It detects malicious activity like DOS attacks, port scans, or even attempts to crack computers by monitoring network traffic. And then there's a HIDS, which is a host-based intrusion detection system. These systems are usually included in auditing for events that occur on a specific host. They're not as common due to the overhead they incur because they have to monitor each system event. And usually, as we have less network-based items than we do hosts, when you do a HIDS, you have a lot more things to deploy than you do in NIDS. IDS alerts, true positive. An IDS raises an alarm when a legit attack occurs. False positive, IDS raises an alarm when no attack has taken place. False negative, IDS does not raise an alarm when a legit attack has taken place. True negative, an IDS does not raise an alarm when attack has not taken place. I will tell you that this false positive, false negative thing, I've seen questions like this in my own certs exams. So just be aware of the differences there. IPS, intrusion prevention systems. This also considered an active IDS, since it's capable of not only detecting intrusions, but preventing them. So that's the big difference there. Detection system just detects, prevention systems detect and prevent. It's continuous monitoring system that often sits behind the firewall, has an additional layer of protection. Unlike an IDS, which is passive, the IPS is placed inline in the network between the source and destination to actively analyze network traffic and to automatically take decisions on traffic that is entering the network. Firewall. These are hardware or software, or like a lot of places, a combo, that prevent unauthorized access to or from private network. They are placed at a juncture or gateway between the two networks, which is usually a private network and a public network such as the internet. And if you look below, they have an example there. Firewalls examine all messages entering or leaving the internet or intranet or private network and block those that do not meet specified security criteria. So you have your internet and intranet, and they don't want the incorrect data going to the different places. So firewall architecture. There is a bastion host, and I like that they have these, and then they also have our little graphics over here. A bastion host is a computer system designed and configured to protect network resources from attacks. Traffic entering or leaving the network passes through the firewall. It has two interfaces, a public interface directly connected to the internet and a private one connected to the intranet. Screened subnet. This screened subnet, or DMZ, contains hosts that offer public services. The DMZ responds to public requests and has no hosts accessed by the private network. This private zone cannot be accessed by internet users. Then there's multi-homed firewall. In this case, firewall with two or more interfaces is present that allows further subdivision of the network based on specific security objectives of the organization. So if you have like one department that is particularly, like if you have one that deals with a high amount of intellectual property that needs to be hidden, sometimes they'll pull that out and give them their own firewall with their own rules that are much tougher than the general area. And that would be a multi-homed firewall. DMZ. So this is a network that serves as a buffer between the internal secure network and insecure internet. It can be created using a firewall with 3 or more network interfaces assigned with specific roles, such as internal trusted network, DMZ network, and the external untrusted network. And you can see here, you have your internet, which is your external corporate network, and then you see your DMZ and firewall there. And as usual, if you have any questions, please stop me. I think a lot of this is also kind of a rehash because we've done some of this before. So hardware and software. Hardware firewall is either a dedicated standalone hardware device, or it comes as part of a router. Network traffic is filtered using packet filtering techniques. It's used to filter out the network traffic for large business networks. The software firewalls are a software program installed on a computer, just like a normal software. It's generally used to filter traffic for individual home users. It only filters traffic for the computer on which it is installed, not the entire network. So that's why I said usually you see a combo. They'll have the hardware firewall for the big stuff, and then you'll see the software firewalls on the individual computers, even though the software firewalls are usually a little more basic. Okay, firewall technology. Firewalls are designed and developed to help with different firewall services. Each firewall service provides security depending on its efficiency and sophistication. Then we have the different technologies used for creating firewall services. Packet filtering, circuit level gateways, application level firewalls, stateful multi-layer inspection, application proxies, NAT or network address translation, and VPNs. Honeypots, these are so much fun to set up. A honeypot is an information system resource that is expressly set up to attract and trap people who attempt to penetrate an organization network. It has no authorized activity, does not have any production value, and any traffic to it is likely to be a probe, attack, or compromise. A honeypot can log port access attempts to monitor an attacker's keystrokes. These could be early warnings of a more concerted attack. Okay, and also remember honey nets, which are just a group of honeypot systems. So classifications of honeypots are based on their design criteria. There's low interaction honeypots. They simulate only a limited number of services and applications of target system or network. Medium interaction. These simulate a real OS, application, and services of a target network. High interaction honeypot. These simulate all of your services and applications of a target network. And then there's what's called a pure honeypot, and they emulate a real production network. And they look like the real thing, so that if they get in there, a lot of times they don't really know the difference. Classification is based on their deployment strategy for the production and research honeypots. Classification of honeypots based on their deception technology. We have malware, spam, spider, database, email, honeypots, and then what I talked about with honey nets, where you have a whole group of them. Don't stand on the keyboard, kitty. Oh my goodness. Come here. Grumpy, come here. All right. Intrusion detection using Yara rules. Yara is a malware research tool that allows, question? The cat has something to say. Yeah. Well, she did just yell at me and now she's sitting on my shoulder. So Yara is a malware research tool that allows security analysts to detect and classify malware or other malicious codes through rule-based approaches. Yara rules are used for examining a private database or malicious binaries across an organization to detect intrusions. YARGen is used for generating Yara rules from strings identified in malware files while removing all strings that also appear in goodware files. And if you look down here, there's different Yara tools that you can see that are out on GitHub. Intrusion detection tools, there's Snort, and this one's been used for quite a long time. Snort is an open source network intrusion detection system capable of performing real-time traffic analysis and packet logging on IP networks. It can perform protocol analysis and content searching and matching, and is used to detect a variety of attacks and probes, such as buffer overflows, stealth port scans, and OS fingerprinting attempts. It uses flexible rule language to describe traffic that it should collect or pass, as well as a detection engine that utilizes a modular plugin architecture. Uses of SNORT: straight packet sniffer like TCP dump, packet logger, useful for network traffic debugging, etc., and then network intrusion prevention systems. Okay, SNORT rules. SNORT's rule engine allows custom rules to be established to meet the needs of the network. SNORT rules help in differentiating between normal internet activities and malicious activities. SNORT rules must be contained on a single line. The SNORT rule parser does not handle rules on multiple lines. SNORT rules come with two logical parts: the header and the which identifies the rule's actions like alerts, logs, pass, active, and dynamic, and then options identifies the rule's alert message. So in this example, you see the front, you have the rule action, rule protocol is after TCP, rule action is the alert, rule formatting direction, the IP address, the port, and then you have the alert message. SNORT rules, rule actions, and IP protocols. The rule header stores the complete set of rules to identify a packet and determines the action to be performed or the rule to be applied. Rule action alerts SNORT when it finds a packet that matches the rule criteria. And there are three available actions: alert, log, or pass. It generates an alert using a selected alert method, and then the log packet. Log is that log packet, or drop, which just ignores the packet. And there are three available IP protocols that it supports: TCP, UDP, and ICMP. Sorry, I'm just going to scroll down and see how. Okay. All right, we're not too far. Okay. The direction operator and IP addresses, what they're talking about, the little arrow thing. The operator indicates direction of interest for the traffic. Traffic can flow in either a single direction or bidirectionally. An example of the SNORT rule using a bidirectional operator, you can see the little less than, greater than, they're both in there. And then IP addresses, to identify the IP address and the port the rule applies to, use the keyword any to define the IP address. And then you see alert, TCP, any, and then you have your direction arrow. So basically what they're talking with that, with the direction arrow, is inbound, outbound is what they're talking about. And then you have your little messages and stuff there. Use numeric IP addresses qualified with a CIDR net mask. And remember that fun when we had to do all that? And then an example of an IP address negation rule. I don't expect you to remember all of these on the first go. This is one of those ones that you need to be aware of SNORT. And this is one that you will probably have, it's possible you can have a question on in CEH, but you just need to be aware right now that SNORT is a intrusion detection tool. Port numbers can be listed in different ways, including any ports, static port definitions, port ranges, and by negation. Port ranges are indicated with a range operator. See a little colon there. And then this one is an example of port negation. And then you have your examples down here with protocols, IP address, action, and it just kind of gives you a little tutorial there. Okay, Suricata. This one is a robust network threat detection engine capable of real-time IDS. Stop chewing on my computer, kitty. Inline intrusion prevention, network security monitoring, and offline PCAP processing. Then there's Alien Vault. This one provides you with feature-rich open source security information and event management system, complete with event collection, normalization, and correlation. And then there's a little list of other IDS intrusion detection tools down there too. Okay, IPS. Yes, I have a kitty that when they're very angry, they like to threaten my laptop. They like to show the teeth to the edge of my laptop and tell me I'm going to bite it. And I have to remind them, no, you're not. Okay, USM Anywhere. This offers threat detection, incident response, and compliance management across cloud, on-prem, and in hybrid environments, and can be integrated with Alien Vault that they talked about previously. These are firewalls, Zone Alarm, Free Firewall, Manage Engine, Firewall Analyzer. And we have some honeypot tools, KF Sensor and Honeybot. These are ones that you can set up your fun little systems if you decide you want to. And because we have so many slides, I'm going to just head on from there. IDS evasion techniques. Oh boy, insertion attacks, evasion, denial of service attack, obfuscation, false positive generation, session splicing, Unicode evasion, fragmentation, overlapping fragments, time to live attacks or TTL, urgency flags, invalid RST packets, polymorphic shell code, ASCII shell code, application layer attacks, desynchronization, encryption, and flooding. All right, so insertion, attack, and invasion. Insertion is the process by which the attacker confuses the IDS by forcing it to read invalid packets. An evasion this is an evasion technique. An end system accepts a packet that the IDS rejects. So we're going to kind of go over these because they're very similar to ones that we've talked about before. I will ask you, do you understand this? And if you guys have questions, we'll stop. So DOS attacks. Many IDS use centralized server for logging alerts. If the attacker knows the IP address of the centralized server, they can perform a DOS or other hacks to slow down and crash the server. And as a result of the attacker's intrusion attempts will not be logged. So there are these 5 options. Causes the device to lock up, causes personnel to be unable to investigate all the alarms, causes more alarms that can be handled by management systems, fills up disk space, and consumes device processing power. Obfuscating and false positives. So obfuscating is an IDS evasion technique used by attackers who encode the attack packet payload in such a way that the destination host can decode the packet, but the IDS cannot. Attackers manipulate the path reference and the signature to fool the HIDS or the host-based IDS. They can encode the attack patterns in Unicode to bypass IDS filters, but it will be understood by an IIS server, or they can use polymorphic code, which is another way to go past signature-based IDS. So you remember how I talked about signature is static. Well, polymorphic code just moves stuff around so that that pattern is no longer the same as it used to be. And attacks on encryption protocols like HTTPS are obfuscated if the attack is encrypted. False positives. The attacker with knowledge of the target IDS can craft malicious packets, because there are some packet crafting tools. Do you remember we've looked at those, just to generate alerts. Those packets are sent to the IDS to generate as many false positive alerts as possible. The attacker then uses these false positive alerts to hide the real attack traffic. So they have all of these false positives just coming in, and then they slip the attack traffic in there too. The attacker can bypass the IDS unnoticed, as it's difficult to differentiate the attack traffic from their big old large volume of false positives. So do you guys, yes, the cry wolf strategy. Yes, absolutely. It's just the IDS version of that. Perfect example. Session splicing and Unicode evasion. So session splicing used as a technique used to bypass the IDS, where the attacker splits the attack traffic into a bunch of packets so that no single packet triggers the IDS. It's effective against an IDS, but only those that do not reconstruct packets before they check them. If the attacker is aware of a delay in packet reassembly at the IDS, they can add delays between packet transmissions to bypass the reassembly. Many IDSs stop reassembly if they do not receive packets within a certain time. The IDS will stop working if the target host keeps the session active for a time longer than the IDS reassembly time. So that's their section where they'll scan and start throwing stuff in so they can try to figure out the reassembly time. And if they're accurate enough, then they can do that. Any attack attempt after successful splicing attack will not be logged by the IDS. Unicode evasion technique. So Unicode is a character coding system to support the worldwide interchange processing and display of written texts. The Unicode code space, all code points are treated differently, but it's possible that there could be multiple representations for a single character. And you can see UTF-16 and then UTF-8 down here. And because of the complexity, some IDS systems handle it improperly, as Unicode allows multiple interpretations of the same characters. Taking this as an advantage, the attackers can convert attack strings to Unicode characters to avoid those pattern and signature matching IDS. So they slip through the IDS, and then the code can be read on the other side. So it's kind of like, if you think about this is just a broad generalization. If you think about if the IDS only read in English, and this is just an example, and you said your attack in Japanese or something like that, and it had no idea how to read that, but the programs and stuff on the other side could read both of those. That's kind of what they're doing.
It'll be fine because everyone knows that computer languages, if they're not the same, don't communicate.
Yeah. Then there's the fragmentation attack. Fragmentation can be used as an attack vector when fragmentation timeouts vary between the IDS and the host. If the fragment reassembly timeout is 10 seconds in the IDS, at the IDS and 20 at the target system, the attacker will send the second fragment 15 seconds after sending the first one. In this scenario, the IDS will drop the fragments as the second fragment is received, but after it's reasonably timed, but the target system will reassemble the fragments. The attacker will keep sending the fragments with 15-second delays until the attack payload is reassembled at the target system. So you can see right here, you have fragments, and then you have the 10-second and 20-second waiting, dropped, and then you can see what they're doing over here. And it takes a while to do this one, but it can work. Similar fragmentation attack works when the IDS timeout exceeds that of the victim. The victim and the IDS both receive fragments 2 and 4 out of the 4 fragments, both carrying a false payload. The victim drops these 2 fragments after 30 seconds and does not send the ICMP as a frag 1 was never received. The victim and the IDS receive frags 1 and 3 out of the 4 fragments. The IDS resembles the 4 received fragments, but the computer net checksum is invalid, so the packet's dropped. The victim and the IDS receive real frags 2 and 4 out of the 4 fragments. The victim reassembles the 4 received fragments and is attacked. The IDS times out fragments 2 and 4 and drops the fragments. So the victim gets them all, or gets the ones that they want, but the IDS doesn't get all of them, so it does not actually see that it's an attack. Overlapping fragments. So this is kind of the same thing. They chop it up into fragments, generate tiny fragments with overlapping TCP sequences. and then they send those. And at the time of reassembling the packets, destination host must know how to assemble those. Some OSs will take original fragments with a given offset, and some will take subsequent fragments. So you can see there's a little one here. TTL attacks. Because we have so many to do, I'm going to cruise through some of these here. We've talked a little bit about TTL attacks. These attacks require the attacker to have prior knowledge of network topology. These are a little bit harder. The information can be obtained using things like traceroute, which give information about the number of routers between the attacker and the victim. The attacker breaks malicious traffic into fragments, and then they have to figure out the TTL in order to get them to function correctly. The urgency flag or URG flag and the TCP header is used to mark the data that requires urgent processing. If the URG flag is set, the TCP protocol sets the urgent pointer field to a 16-bit offset value that points at the last byte of the urgent data of the segment. Many IDS do not consider the urgent pointer and process all the packets in the traffic, whereas the target system process the urgent data only. This results in the IDS and target system having different sets of packets, which can be exploited by the attacker to pass the attack traffic. So, and a lot of these are very, very technical, but just understand some of the basics and come back and look at some of these. Invalid RST packets. So this is the reset packet. The reset flag and the TCP header is used to close a TCP connection. An invalid reset attack where the attacker sends the reset packet to the IDS with invalid checksum. The IDS stops processing the packet, thinking the TCP communication session has ended, but the target system receives the packet. Polymorphic shellcode. So remember me talking about how they change things around so that you don't understand all the different signatures and it constantly changes. That's the whole basis of polymorphic shellcode. ASCII shellcode is basically those ASCII characters, which are only in the ASCII standard. Attackers can use ASCII shellcode to bypass the IDS signature, as pattern matching does not work effectively with ASCII values. The scope of ASCII shellcode is limited, and as not all assembly instructions can be converted to ASCII values directly, this limitation can be overcome by using sets of instructions for converting ASCII values properly. So, and this is an example over here. Application layer attacks. This is where application accessing media files like audio, video, and images are compressed, them into smaller sizes for maximizing data transfer rates. The IDS cannot verify the signature of the compressed file format. This enables the attacker to exploit the vulnerabilities in compressed data. The IDS can recognize conditions favorable for an attack, but alternative forms of attack are also possible. For example, various integer values can be used to exploit things like integer overflow vulnerabilities, and it makes it very difficult to detect. Desynchronization, do you remember us talking about desynchronization? This is similar. This attack is performed by sending the initial SYN before the real connection is established, but with an invalid TCP checksum. If a SYN packet is received after the TCP control block is opened, IDS resets the appropriate sequence number to match that of the newly received SYN packet. Attacker then send a fake SYN packet with completely invalid sequence number to desynchronize the IDS and stop the IDS from monitoring legit traffic. Post-connection SYN. In this technique, attackers attempt to desynchronize the IDS from the actual sequence numbers that the kernel is honoring. The attackers send post-connection SYN packets in the data stream, which will have divergent sequence numbers. However, the target host will ignore the sync packet as it references an already established connection. The intent of this attack is to get the IDS to resynchronize its notion of the sequence numbers to a new SYN packet. It will then ignore any data with the legitimate part of the original stream because it'll be waiting a different sequence number. After successfully resynchronizing the IDS with a SYN packet, attackers send a reset packet with a new sequence number and then close its notion of the connection. So we can also use encryption for encrypted sessions and then flooding as well. Whatever Jesus. Okay. So I am going to list these and tell you to come back and look at these. Firewalking, banner grabbing, IP address spoofing, source routing, tiny fragments, using an IP address in place of a URL, using a proxy server, ICMP tunneling, ACK tunneling, and HTTP tunneling, SSH and DNS tunneling, through external systems, through man-in-the-middle attacks, through content and cross-site scripting attacks, through HTML smuggling, and through window bits. So there are a lot of the same stuff that you saw when we talked about stuff yesterday. NAC and endpoint security evasion techniques. There's VLAN hopping using pre-authenticated devices, ghostwriting, application whitelisting, XLM weaponizing, dechaining macros, clearing memory hooks, using Metasploit, bypassing semantic endpoint protection, hosting phishing sites, passing encoded commands, fast flux DNS method, timing-based evasion, and signed binary proxy execution. So we'll go through these because they are different than the other stuff. VLAN hopping is basically just hopping across, hopping to gain access to the network through dynamic trunk protocol. You set up a trunk with the switch. The DTP packets are forwarded by the attacker by setting the switch mode to dynamic auto or dynamic desirable. The attackers use tools like Frogger, which was named precisely for the hopping, to perform VLAN enumeration, and then they hop. Pre-authenticated devices, attackers gain access to authenticated devices that use that device to bypass NAC. Then this device is used to log into the network and smuggle in network packages from a different device. Attackers place their device, you'll see those Raspberry Pis, they throw those in there, between the pre-authenticated device and the authentication server to ensure traffic flows through the attacker's device. And then they use tools like NAC bypass and NACR to bypass NAC via pre-authenticated device. Ghostwriting is a bypass technique that involves modifying the structure of the malware code without affecting its functionality. It's used to bypass antivirus software by utilizing binary deconstruction, insertion of arbitrary assembly code, and reconstruction. Attackers use this technique to bypass the endpoint device security agents, such as antivirus, and hide malware to evade signature-based detection. Attackers use tools such as ghostwriting SH to modify the structure of the malware. And application whitelisting. Application whitelisting is a security feature in Windows systems to defend against the execution of malware applications. While executing a legitimate application, it looks for required DLLs in the current location where the executable is saved. The attacker performs DLL hijacking to place malicious DLL with a legitimate name that the application is looking for in the same directory where the executable resides. The malicious DLL gets executed along with the application, and then it disables your endpoint security. They also use things like run DLL and things like that to evade application whitelisting for those endpoint security. You can use XLM weaponizing to bypass it, or macros. This is why a lot of times when you have spam servers, this even receiving these macros or sheets with macros has been disabled. So XLM weaponization, they create a reverse shell payload with PowerScript, then use a script obfuscator and try loading it into an XLM macro to bypass detection. If it's still detected, they employ a web dev share to execute the script from a mounted drive, and then they run the payload with bypass execution flag. and then creating a reverse shell to bypass the endpoint protection you can see here. Dechaining macros. Attackers perform dechaining of macros to evade endpoint detection and modify memory, registry, and other Windows files with VB-script. You can use shellcon and then XML-DOM for this. And then there are some other ones down here as well. Clearing memory hooks. Memory hooks are placed by an endpoint detection and response or EDR agent to collect information for performing memory-based analysis. Attackers often try to bypass the EDR in memory by unhooking the EDR DLLs. The attacker needs to find the target application DLLs, the associated functions, and syscalls exported. Then they use open source tools like x64 debugger to identify the hooked syscalls stored in memory. Then they create a payload that can overwrite these hooks in the memory by restoring the exact bytes of data. And then this can be done by reloading the right location in memory containing those. You can use Metasploit templates to bypass your antivirus. You can bypass semantic endpoint protection with, let's see here, Covenant C2 framework and Donut on this one. And then we have a bunch of other techniques here. We have hosting of phishing sites, passing encoded commands, fast flux DNS method, timing-based evasion, and signed binary proxy execution. All right, tools. IDS firewall evading tools. There's Traffic IQ Professional. This one generates custom attack traffic, which allows attackers to bypass the installed perimeter devices in the target network. There's also some stuff in Nmap and Metasploit and these other ones over here. Packet fragment generator tools. Colosoft packet builder, you've seen that one mentioned several times. NetScan Tools Pro, basically you just custom create your packets. And all those ones that we talked about with the packet-based stuff, that's where that comes in. Detecting honeypots. Attackers can determine the presence of honeypots by probing the services running on system. They can craft malicious probe packets to scan for services like HTTP over HTTPS, SMPTS, and IMAP or IMAP-S. Ports that show a specific service running but deny a three-way handshake connection indicate the presence of a honeypot. So here are some tools that help detect the honeypots. SendSafe Honeypot Hunter and Kippo Detect. Detecting and defeating honeypots. Detecting the presence of layer 7 tar pits. Observe the latency of the response from the service. So that indicates that there is a bit of a time lag and there might be something going on. Detecting the presence of layer 4 tar pits. Analyze the TCP window size, where tar pits continuously acknowledge incoming packets, even though the TCP window size is reduced to 0. That indicates that it's not a valid system. Detecting the presence of layer 2 tar pits. If an attacker is present on the same network as the layer 2 tar pits, then the attacker can detect the presence of this daemon by looking at the response with unique MAC address, which act as a kind of black hole. Detecting honeypots running on VMware. Observe the IEE standards for current range of MAC address signed with VMware Inc. And detecting the presence of honeyed honeypots. Perform your time-based TCP fingerprinting methods with SYN proxy behavior. Detecting the presence of user mode Linux honeypot. Look at your files like proc mounts, proc interrupts, and proc command line, which contain UML specific information. Detecting the presence of SPEC-hosted SPEC-based honeypots. SPEC logs everything that is accessed via read before transferring it to the network, causing the congestion effect analyze the congestion in the network layer, detecting the presence of snort inline honeypot, analyze outgoing packets by capturing the snort inline modified packets through another host system and identifying the packet modification, detecting the presence of a fake AP. Fake access points only send beacon frames and do not generate any fake traffic on the access points, and an attacker can monitor network traffic and easily notice the presence of a fake AP. Detecting the presence of a bait and switch honeypot, observe specific TCP/IP parameters like round trip or time or RTT and TTL and TCP timestamps. And here's some honeypot detection tools. SendSafe Honeypot Hunter. This one checks a bunch of the stuff that we've talked about previously, and you can see some nice little options here. All right, we're on to our last one. Hang on, we're almost done. How to defend against IDS evasion. Shut down switch ports associated with known attack hosts. Perform an in-depth analysis of ambiguous network traffic for all possible threats. Use TCP fin or a reset packet to terminate malicious TCP sessions. Why do you think that would work? I'm just checking to see how many of you are actually awake. $42. Okay, I will take that as a valid answer because it made me laugh. And yes, I know that's a Cards Against Humanity rule. I know it's just a huge influx of traffic it's just a giant brain dump here. So
42, it might be from Cards Against Humanity, but it was from Guardian or not Hitchhiker's Guide.
It's
Guide to
Hitchhiker's Guard.
Verse.
But I use Cards Against Humanity rules. If you can make me laugh, yeah, you can get points for certain things. So on this one, remember those finish and reset ones where it would try to force those in order to get the IDS and IDP to or IPS to have issues, then that's why they would cause that. Look for the NOP-OP code and other 0x90 to defend against polymorphic shellcode problems. Train users to identify attack patterns and regularly update and patch all systems and network devices. Deploy IDS after a thorough analysis of network topology, nature of traffic, network traffic, and number of hosts monitored. So remember me talking about creation of baselines. So that is what they're talking about here. That is just a very in-depth creation of one. Use traffic normalizer to remove potential ambiguity from packet stream before it gets to your IDS. Ensure the IDS normalizes fragmented packets and allows those packets to be reassembled in the proper order. Define DNS server for client resolver and routers or similar network devices. Harden security of all communication devices like modems and routers. If possible, block ICMP TTL expired packets at the external interface level and change the TTL field to a large value. Then that just helps keep them from guessing the TTL. Regularly update the antivirus signature database because they constantly change. Use traffic normalization solutions at the IDS to protect the system against evasion. Store the attack information, attack IP, victim IP, timestamp, etc., for future analysis. So don't just dump everything if you have an attack, because chances are if you've been attacked by that person once, they will try again. Defending against firewall evasion. Firewalls should be configured such that the IP address of the intruder should be filtered out. Set the firewall rule set to deny all traffic and enable only the services required. I have seen some massively terrible firewall setups where they basically allow everything and they do the opposite of this. Don't do that. If possible, create a unique user ID to run the firewall services instead of running the services using an administrator or root ID. Configure a remote syslog server and apply strict measures to protect it from malicious users. That also helps you with audits. Monitor firewall logs at regular intervals and investigate all suspicious log entries found. By default, disable all FTP connections. That really shouldn't have to be said, but you know. Catalog and review inbound and outbound traffic allowed through the firewall. Run regular risk queries to identify vulnerable firewall rules. That is something a lot of people are guilty of not doing because it can be a hassle, but it can save you a lot of time in the long run from the consequences of not doing that. Monitor user access to firewall and control who can modify firewall configuration. The less people that can configure it, the better, because you will have people overriding their own different rules, and you really should have a handful of people. This is one of those less is more situations. Specify the source and destination IP addresses as well as the ports. Notify the security policy administrator about firewall changes and document them. Please do this, because if you change something and something happens and you forget to tell somebody and they go, "What's this?" and just delete it, you can have some serious issues. Control physical access to the firewall. Take regular backups of the firewall rule set and configuration files. Schedule regular firewall security audits. All right. I am going to do a summary because I know this was a ton. All right. So we did IDS, IPS firewall, and honeypot concepts and solutions. Techniques for bypassing the IDS and firewall. Techniques for NAC and endpoint, bypassing NAC and endpoint security. Various IDS firewall evasion tools. How to detect and defeat honeypots. And then we talked about various countermeasures we should employ in order to prevent those issues. So that is it for this module. Do you have, I know that you guys probably are just drilling in the corner right now because that's a lot. Do you have any questions about the IDS or firewall stuff that you can think of off the top of your head?
I'm just gonna have to go through this or reread the chapter a few times while listening to this in the background.
Yeah, there's just a ton of stuff on this one. Looking at the slides again and again is a really good idea on this one. It cannot hurt. Is there a question? Yeah, a lot of it is just, there is a lot of review, and a lot of it is crossover from previous modules because it runs on the same concepts as module for 11 for session hijacking. A lot of it is very similar. Okay, I'm going to stop the lecture here, and then I'll talk to you guys about some homework stuff.